Okay, members, thank you for your attention. My name is Wilber Ssebuyungo Kivekayunga. So we are looking at the question itself to digress it and break it down. So here we have soft drinks. There are four soft drinks that we have here. We have Riham, Fruity, Rock Boom, and Sky View. This is Sky View. So here we have output. In the output column, we have the number of bottles that are produced, and that's why you see the ham has the 10,000, Fruity 67,000, and the others. So those are what the production volumes that have been produced, and then or that are to be produced. Then here we also have what we call material cost per bottle. So each bottle for Riham will have to consume materials of 20 shillings. So those are 20 shillings per bottle, and the Fruity will be 60, and then the other you can see. Then when you look at labor hours per bottle, so that means that for a bottle to be produced, 3 hours, that is if it is the ham cola, 3 hours will be spent on producing a bottle. So in this breakdown that I'm displaying to you, we are able to see that we are having two aspects here, uh, which are very key in costing a unity bottle, a single bottle. One, we are having material costs, and then two, we are having labor hours. So what we are not having how much it takes to produce
Who?
a single
Do what?
bottle in terms of labor hours, in terms
Hey,
of production direct labor per bottle. So what we are having is the labor hours, but not the cost of direct labor going
oh,
into a
Mirai.
bottle. So for that case, for us to arrive at uh, direct labor, we've got to base on the labor hours that we have. So we can look at the column for labor hours, and we are able to see that the ham will take 3 hours to produce it, and then Fruity 5 hours, Rock Boom 6, and this Sky View we have 2 hours. Now let us look at the other side where we look at hours. This is a real the first table which we have looked at, but here let us look at the aspect of direct labor. Now I'm pulling out direct labor and maintaining the production volumes or the quantities produced. So direct labor is what we are dealing on, given the fact that we have already seen that we have material costs already given to us. Now we have labor hours. We want to get the direct labor, that is direct, that word is called to be direct labor per hour. So we ask ourselves a question: how many how much is the cost for producing a single bottle in 1 hour? That is the direct labor cost you're seeing there. It is already provided. It is 35 shillings. So if we looked at our question there that we had, you will see where we say direct labor cost is shillings 35 per hour. Okay, so we are having direct labor cost as shilling 35 per hour. So that tells us that I've just pulled out that 35 shillings to be the direct labor cost per hour for every bottle, regardless of its brand. Now we see that for the ham there are 3 hours, and the direct labor cost per that bottle of Riham, which is going to be produced in 3 hours, is 35 shillings. Okay, so that tells us if we are to ask ourselves, uh, what is the direct labor cost per bottle? Per bottle, okay, we see that we are taking 3 hours to produce the ham cola, and each hour we pay the laborer, the worker, 35 shillings. So it means that for this single bottle of Riham, we are going to say 3 hours of producing Riham cola times 35 shillings per hour, which we are going to pay for the worker, which makes us have 105 shillings. That 105 shillings is the direct labor cost per bottle. I think now we get the concept here. So we have 3 hours of producing Riham cola, and each hour is 35 shillings for producing it. So for the 3 hours, we are having a multiplication of 3 times 35 shillings. So that is what we are having here as the unit production cost in terms of labor, in terms of direct labor that goes in a single bottle. So here, our greatest intention is to have the cost per bottle, the cost per bottle that goes, the cost of labor that goes in each bottle. So that's what is also being done for fruity. For fruity, we produce it for 5 hours, and then when we multiply by 35 shillings per hour, we see the cost is higher because we are having more production hours for it. Local boom has more hours again, so it is 6 hours times 35 shillings. So that is what we are having here in this column of direct labor cost per bottle. Is very important because that's what we are going to add on material cost per bottle. Okay, the other computations I added there were for my own importance. So let us just, for the purpose of this presentation, we are ending at direct labor cost per bottle because we want to see the price per bottle. Now, after that is direct labor cost we have got, but we had another concept of
Just a
overhead
moment,
cost.
Wilber.
Yes, please.
Just a moment, Wilber.
Yes,
Remember,
please.
I said if there's anything not clear, you point out so that the member can clarify.
Oh,
Continue.
is there something that we need more clarity?
No,
Maybe.
no, just I'm just telling members just in case there's anything they want to ask.
Okay.
Just
So, members, in case there is any question, please, you can unmute and speak or raise
yeah. So
your hand.
proceed.
Now we are having the other element of overhead costs. When we look at our question again, we are able to see that we have overhead costs for the period amounts to 5 million shillings. So that is our overhead cost in for the period. So this tells us here that have just pulled out the overhead cost of 5 million shillings. But remember that we are intending to have what we call uh, uh, the overhead cost, which is for a single hour, for a single hour. So it is important to have, yes, that is overhead cost for the period, but we need to know how many hours are in that period so that we are able to tell how many production hours we have for the period, and it is from those production hours that we are able to tell the overhead cost per hour. Then we can transform that into knowing how many hours are produced in producing a single bottle. Then we can now get the overhead cost that goes in that single bottle. So for that case, we need to go back here in the previous example where we are basing on labor hours, where we see that we need to get total hours, production hours for the period. Okay, total production hours for that period where the overhead cost of 5 million was incurred. Now, total labor hours here, which I have, I'm saying we have 10,000 bottles of Riham. How many hours uh, uh, we are spent to produce them? We see that there are 10,000 bottles, but each bottle needed 3 hours. Sorry, there are 10,000 bottles. Each bottle needed 3 hours to produce. So it means that the total production hours for the period, for the whole period, for specifically ham, is 3 hours per bottle times the 10,000 the 10,000 bottles. That is the 30,000 you're seeing here. I have also done that to fruity by saying, yeah, there are 67,000 bottles, but each bottle is 5 hours. That means it took 335,000 hours to produce fruity for that whole period. Now, I've done that for all, and I've summed up here total production hours, or total labor hours for the period. That is what we are having here as 1,999,000 hours. Those are labor hours, the hours where people are actually working on producing these bottles, each category of bottles. Now, we have been given overhead costs. The overhead cost for the period is 5 million, and then the total production hours are those 1,909. This is the 99,000 hours. This is 1,099,000 hours. So we want to know how much was the overhead cost in a single hour. For a single hour, how much? That is overhead cost per hour. So we are getting the total overhead cost, the total overhead cost for the period, divided by the total labor hours, which here are even called production hours, but others could call it labor hours because your production is taking place at the same time laborers are working. So this is 5 million divided by 1,099,000. So I got here 4.55 to that is to 2 decimal places. This is overhead cost per hour. Remember that our target is to find overhead cost per bottle, a single bottle. But what we are having here is overhead cost. Oh, I lost connection somewhere. So we are having,
Yes.
I don't
I
know
think this
where.
was the same table, so you can continue with this same table.
Okay, we want to get overhead cost per hour. So we have total hours of production or that labor took to produce, workers took to produce, and the cost for that period. So we want to get a ratio which is 5 million divided by the total production hours or labor hours. So which I got as 4.55. Now we have 4.55. This is overhead cost per hour, not yet overhead cost per bottle. So we have when we get per hour, that is a good achievement. So I've come up with the variable which we had previously. Soft drinks, the production volumes which are here, and then labor hours per bottle, that is I've also put. And then I am making sure this overhead cost here is a fixed overhead cost for the period, and therefore it is a fixed overhead cost per hour and for every bottle. So I've fixed it here, making it uniform for every category of the bottles. And now what I've done is to make sure that I get overhead cost per bottle. This 4.55 here is per hour. Then I say for Riham there are 3 hours for producing a single bottle, that is a unit bottle. So I will get 4.55 times 3 to get the overhead cost for a bottle of Riham, which is 13.6. Okay, now I'll go to Fruity and do the same. The hours for labor hours are differing, but the overhead cost per hour is fixed, is the same. So when we multiply 5 times 4.55, we get 22.7. I've done the same to Rock Boom and Sky View. This is Sky View. So this is what I'm having here as overhead cost. So the other column for total overhead cost, I just wanted to see whether it makes the 5 million for the period. So that one we can leave it, that column. So
Sorry, Wilber, just for just sorry for interruption about this. So just I want to ask you a question here for overhead cost per hours. That
mm,
only gives us like a 4.55. Where did you come from? This is for 4.55 overhead power.
okay, okay. Now, what do we call an overhead cost? So the overhead cost per hour that we're asking, which is 4.55, we've said what is the overhead cost amount. Okay, the word cost covers the word amount. What's the overhead cost for the period? When you read the question we have on our desk, it shows that the overhead cost for the period is 5 million. Hopefully you have seen that statement. Okay, if you've seen the statement that the overhead cost is 5 million, so you put the 5 million somewhere, that is the cost for the period called overhead cost. And then we ask how many hours are we producing the products that we have for that period. How many hours are we producing the the products for that period? So it tells us we needed to get, let me go back to the previous table here, if it can allow. Okay, it is not allowing somehow. But the previous table I was showing you that we needed to get total labor hours for that period. That means you needed to get, like, for example, for Riham cola, you have 3 hours per bottle, and then there are 10,000 bottles. So how many labor hours are for Riham cola? So you multiply 3 hours per bottle times the total bottles produced for the period, which are 30,000. So you go and do the same for all the bottles that will be produced for Fruity, Rock Boom, and Skyview. Then total those hours as total labor hours. So the total labor hours we have are 1,099,000. Now we ask ourselves, if for the period we have 5 million as overhead cost, and the hours are 1,099,000. What is the overhead cost for a single hour? Then we said 5 million divided by the total labor hours or production hours. The total labor hours, that's where we got the 4.55. And that is fixed. So it is for every kind of bottle. It is not a variable cost. It's not variable. It is fixed for every category of bottles. So that's where we got the 4.55. We got 5 million divided by total labor hours. Okay. Now, I don't know why this has refused to move forward.
Try to refresh. Try to refresh. You may withdraw and here again. That's the other thing. Try.
Help me to make me a presenter again. I don't know why I keep losing the rights.
Okay, I've done that.
Possibly it was because I had lost the rights to present. Okay. Now, going forward, we in our summary sheet, maybe the person who has just joined. In our summary, we have, at the beginning we were given our material cost per bottle. Here in costing, to get prices, uh uh making transforming all costs to be per unit item, or per bottle for this case, is very key. So when we saw here material cost per bottle, that one we don't need to calculate again, because we have reached at per bottle. So we have material cost is already covered. You can take note of the material cost per bottle. And then our other labor was to get direct labor cost per bottle. Then we have it here, per bottle. That's the second element. Now the third element is to have overhead cost per bottle. We have it here also. So those are three elements, aspects that we have here in coming up with the with total production cost. Material cost plus direct labor cost plus overhead cost per bottle. Each of them should be per bottle. Per bottle.
I see there is a question by
Which
Amok. Amok, you want to ask something?
Yes, I would like to request Wilber to go back to the previous slide. It's something that I did not quite pick well.
I've gone back, sir.
The previous one, you go behind.
Is it there?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, please.
Kindly make me understand where you come from, where the 38 million comes from.
I had sidelined this, but I had sidelined this total
So we should
production.
ignore it.
Yeah, you should ignore it. I included it for my own computations. So you should ignore it.
Okay.
Let us end at total production hours, and we also have direct labor costs here. Okay. Sorry for that. So now here we have I'm coming up with the summary from the previous, the summary of costs per bottle. Material costs, I've pulled out the one for material costs I've showed you earlier.
Amok has a hand up.
Hamoko?
It was a mistake.
Oh. Then direct labor cost per bottle, I've also pulled out direct labor cost per bottle, and for each category of drinks, of the soft drinks. And then the overhead costs per bottle, I've also pulled them out here. Then I'm here saying production cost per bottle. That's total production cost per bottle. I would add the word total production cost per bottle. That is I'm summing up material cost plus direct labor cost per bottle plus overhead cost per bottle. That's an addition of 20 plus 105 plus 13.65 to get the 138.6. I've done that similarly to all other bottles. Okay. Now, when I got this total production cost, and now that is now ready for the bottle is ready. Here we are not having packaging anyway. The bottle is ready for selling. But we cannot sell without making some margin. I've called it margin, but the difference which is 30%. So this 30% is already there, given to us in the question. If you look at the question, that we are going to get 30% from above the production cost. So 30% of 138.6 is 42 here, 42 shillings. I've done it similarly. The 30% is uniform for every category of bottle. Then I said the selling price will be the 100 for Riham Cola is 138.6 plus 42. That is approximately 180 shilling as the selling price for the bottle. So that is, I didn't sell this to the common Uganda shillings, like this one would be around 200 shillings. So I've just left it to be computed computed price. That is the last slide here that I have. The other arguments, those ones we could discuss them, but mostly here was to come up with the computations. Thank you, Doctor.
Members, any questions? Any questions for the presenter?